Hey guys, today I'm taking you through my process of creating this CGI car video for Zeekr. From modeling and rigging to motion tracking, smoke simulation and rendering. Now this wasn't a simple import, click and done project. Oh no, it was filled with Blender bugs, tracking nightmares and hours of troubleshooting. And hey, before we jump in, make sure you hit that like button, otherwise it might start shaking, kinda like my tracking points when they failed. Alright, let's get started. First step was importing the car model into Blender, but as expected it didn't come in perfectly. The geometry was messy, full of bumps and shading issues, which would look awful on the final render, so the first thing I did was cleaning it up. To do that, I went in and manually fixed the geometry, making sure everything was smooth. Then, to help space out and lag some of vertices, use the Loop Tool plugin, a really useful tool for fine-tuning the shape of a model. I started by working on the main body of the car, making sure everything looked solid. Once that was done, I moved on the hood and refined the details there as well. To help everything accurate, I started adding a reference image in the scene, because the last thing I wanted was to spend hours modeling only to realize I had accidentally created a completely different car. But after a lot of problem solving and a little of suffering, I finally got to this result. Once the model was done, it was time to rig the car so I could animate it properly. For that, I used the Rig a Car add-on, a great tool for setting up cars rig in Blender. At first, I thought this step would be simple, but Blender had another plans for me. The rig wasn't working correctly in the latest version of Blender, no matter what I tried. Things keep breaking. After a bit of dipping, I found a solution. Instead of trying to force it to work in the last Blender version, I installed an older version, rigged the car there, and then import it back to the newer version. It was an annoying workaround, but hey, it worked. Next, I needed to track the video to make sure my CGI car would move realistically with real world footage. For my first attempt, I tried using FSpy to set up the correct perspective and then GeoTracker to automatically track the motion. In theory, this should have worked perfectly, but nope. The problem was that my footage started from the top of a building and moved downwards, which made tracking extremely difficult. Because of the camera movement, a lot of tracking points got lost during the transition, and the final result was completely shaking and unstable. At this point I knew I had to try a different method. After doing some research and spending a solid hour questioning my life choices, I decided to switch to Blender's built-in motion tracking tool. This was a game changer. Blender's tracking tools are super powerful and best of all, they're free. Thank you Blender God. So I imported the video into Blender motion tracking workspace and let the software automatically detect tracking points. I also manually placed a few extra points in the area to make sure everything was as stable as possible. Once I had enough tracking points, I ran Blender Solve to clean up the motion. Some points were moving way too much, so I had to filter them out and rerun the solution a few times. Eventually I got a final tracking error of 0.53 pixel, which is actually really good for our case. With that, I finally had a stable and accurate tracking setup. Now that my scene was tracked, I started placing the 3D objects into it. First, I created a large 3D cylinder to act as the back building, mainly for shadow catching. Then I imported my rigged car and placed it on a simple platform. But here's when I ran into another big challenge. Normally, when animating a car, you assume it's moving on a flat road, but since the car scene involved a curved building, the wheels weren't aligned correctly. To fix it, I had to manually adjust the car's movement frame by frame until it looked natural. It was a boring process, but in the end the movement looked realistic and seamless. Now, to make the animation more dynamic, I wanted to add smoke effects, and this is where Blender decided to mess with me again. No matter what I did, I kept running into random errors that made absolutely no sense. I spent hours searching through forums, tweaking settings, and even asking ChatGPT to help. Shoot out to AI for saving my sanity. After a lot of trial and error, I finally got the smoke simulation working properly, and it added a ton of realism to the scene. Now that everything was set up, it was time to render the animation. First, I did a test render at 720p, which took me around 1 to 2 hours. This was just to show the client how things were looking. After viewing, the client asked me to remove the platform and make the car exit the scene in a more natural way. So I went back adjusting the animation and preparing for the final render. Since this was a high resolution, final quality render, it took me around 4 to 6 hours to complete it. Perfect timing for me to go to sleep and wake up to a finished product. And that's how I created this CGI car video for Zeekr. From fixing the model and rigging it, to motion tracking, adding smoke effects and rendering the final animation. This project had its fair shares of challenges, but honestly, that's what makes CGI fun. Every mistake is a learning experience, and in the end, it was totally worth it. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to see more CGI projects, let me know in the comments. In my next video I might showcase a CGI project for Porsche Center. So if you want to see that, smash that like button and subscribe. Until next time, have a great day, bye!